Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. My name is Sumrein. I'm coming to you from the European Chemicals Agency, and I am the product manager of the EU Observatory for Nanomaterials. I'll be talking to you today about the public perception of nanomaterials by the regular EU citizens, and this will be presenting on the outcome of a study that we conducted at the EU ON in 2020. So, to start out with, I'll give you a rough outline of my presentation for today. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about the EU Observatory for Nanomaterials, what exactly is the observatory, why it was set up. I'll tell you a little bit about the goals of the observatory, what we really want to achieve with our work. And then from there, I'll launch straight into the study that's the subject of today's talk on how the EU citizen perceives nanomaterials. And this was a study that was performed and funded by the EU ON. I'll go ahead and tell you about why we did this particular study. I'll give you a bit of information about how we did it so you can understand that. And then I'll focus more on what are the conclusions and outcomes from this particular study. And finally, at the end, I'll have a bit of reflection about what this means for the EU Observatory for Nanomaterials. So let's get started with first talking about the EU Observatory for Nanomaterials. So a few years ago, there was a discussion ongoing in the public domain about how we communicate about nanomaterials. And there was the feeling, the perception that there is a limited amount of information available about nanomaterials in the public domain. And this lack of information, or the perception of lack of information, was creating, or there was a sense that this was creating a difference between what nanomaterials are and how the public actually views nanomaterials. So overall, there was a sense that there isn't enough information out there on in the public domain about nanomaterials. In order to address this situation, the European Commission came up with a number of initiatives. One of these is the EU Observatory for Nanomaterials, which got started in 2017 based on an agreement between ECHA and the Commission. So the Commission funds ECHA to create the EU Observatory for Nanomaterials. In addition to this observatory, the Commission also did a number of other actions. So they adopted a definition or a recommendation for a definition of a nanomaterial, so that whenever people are talking about nanomaterials, at least in a regulatory context, they are using the same language, the same terminology. And then finally, the Commission made some changes to the REACH regulation that included explicit requirements for companies that are making nanomaterials or importing nanomaterials that they need to provide specific information about these substances under the REACH regulation for chemicals. So overall, these actions were aimed at improving the level of information out there on nanomaterial, and the EU ON itself has the goal of improving the level of transparency and the level of availability of information to the public. And this basically functions just like a normal astronomical observatory would. An astronomical observatory aims at collecting information about the stars. You know, we can all look at the sky and see the stars at night, but really an observatory has a high-powered telescope that brings this information closer to us and makes it more easily accessible by the regular citizen. And this is what the EU Observatory on Nanomaterials aims to do. And now, how this goal will be achieved? Well, the whole question on transparency of nanomaterials can be seen like a jigsaw puzzle. There's already a lot of information out there from different sources. So there's information from EU-funded research projects on nanomaterials. There's information from different EU agencies that might be regulating nanomaterials, and from the European Commission as well as information from around the globe as well. But sometimes the picture is unclear because we don't have all the pieces of the information available to us. And so the EU aims to improve this picture by basically doing three things. One is to first collect the existing information that is out there in the public domain. And then once this information is collected, we look at the information, we analyze it, and we try to identify if there are certain important knowledge gaps, and we try to fill these knowledge gaps by doing studies. And what I will be talking to you about is an example of such a study that we did. And then we try to take this information that we collect, the studies that we perform, and we share this with the public in a way that is easy to access and easy to understand by the regular EU citizen. And of course, the EU is not working alone. So I mentioned already the initiatives that were done by the Commission in terms of a definition of nanomaterials and the changes to the REACH regulation. And we should see the EU as really complementing these other EU actions, not as a replacement for these actions. So from here on, I'll jump straight into our study. And the study is really aiming to address a simple question, which is how does the EU citizen really perceive nanomaterials? So let's start out by saying, well, why do we perform such a study? Well, as a starting point, we know that there are already today many products on the EU market that are using nanomaterials or nanotechnology. We can have nanomaterials in things as car tires, we can have them in cosmetics, we can have them in textiles, and slowly these are becoming really an integral part of our daily lives. At the same time, we have seen that there have been a number of studies done over the past years that show that even though nanomaterials are being put as products, as consumer products, there is in general a low level of awareness by the public about what nanomaterials are, what are their benefits for the EU citizen, and what are also the risks, and how are these risks and hazards assessed and controlled at a regulatory level. And there is the feeling or the concern that this lack of awareness can result in a certain level of mistrust of nanomaterials, or perhaps even fear of nanomaterials. And if the consumer becomes fearful or mistrustful, then this could have the impact that people might choose not to use nanomaterials, and then we might lose some of the benefits that these materials might have to offer for us. But also, on the other hand, that they would not be aware of how to use nanomaterials properly, of the hazards that are associated with these materials. So we conducted this study to try to understand really how does the public see nanomaterials, so that we can address any issues that might come out of it. And the kind of questions we wanted to ask were things like, first of all, how does the public see nanomaterials? Do they see them as hazardous? Do they see them as safe? or do they not care either way? Do they not have a view either way? A second kind of question we were thinking about is, if a consumer, if you, I, go out to purchase a nanomaterial, um, purchase a product, and they know that this product contains a nanomaterial, so they're aware of the contents of the product. If they're aware of it, would they be more likely, or would they be less likely to say, I want to buy this product, or would they be neutral about this? And then we wanted to see, as a general rule, how these attitudes might correlate with certain factors. So how they might correlate with demographic factors like age, like gender. Are men and women, do they have a different perception of nanomaterials? And also, how do different EU citizens in different countries view these? There might be some differences there as well. So these are the kind of questions we wanted to address in this study. Now, let's think about how we did this particular study. So we conducted the study, like I mentioned earlier, in 2020, and the results were published in November of last year. So this is relatively fresh information now. The way we did the study was by a combination of literature searches, so finding what information is already out there, and then doing public surveys with regular EU citizens in different EU countries. So we did this work together with our contractor, ECHA. And we started this out by first doing a literature survey. So the work looked at around 402 previous publications related to the topic. We collected the information there and analyzed it. And then this information was also used to create a new survey, which had 28 questions on it, addressing a variety of different topics that might be related to nanomaterials. And we ran this survey in 5 specific EU countries. These are Austria, Bulgaria, Finland, France, and Poland. And in each country, we had 1,000 respondents responding, so a total of 5,000 respondents overall. And these 5 countries were selected based on a variety of factors with the aim of them being representative for the EU as a whole, because we could not, in the scope of this study, run the study across all EU countries. But these countries were aimed to represent different kinds of populations, whether that's populations that came earlier to the EU or later to the EU, different levels of income, etc. So to give as accurate a picture of EU citizens as a whole. Now, let's start with some of the findings from this study, and I'll start with some general findings and then go into a bit more detail. So first of all, the level of general awareness about nanomaterials by the EU citizens is relatively low. At the same time, we're seeing that the level of awareness is increasing, and we can know this because there have been previous studies done, and the methodology that we used in this study is comparable to those, so we can compare the results and see the level of awareness has been increasing over the years. Now, when we asked in the survey, how concerned are you about nanomaterials? Are you concerned or not? Around 25% of the respondents say we are concerned about nanomaterials in some way. Now, to put this into a little bit of context, we asked questions about how people feel about other kinds of technologies. So we see that this level of concern, so saying 25% are concerned, is similar to other technologies like computers, like social networks, like electronics. So that gives you an idea of what the level of concern is. It's roughly the same level of concern as the EU citizen has about using computers or social networks. But it is far less than some other technologies. So Around 2/3 of the respondents said they were concerned about things like genetically modified organisms or global warming or plastic waste. So you can see a clear distinction between the level of concern that people have for nanomaterials. And then, importantly, around the same number of people, so around 25% of the respondents also say they have no distinct opinion about nanomaterials as a whole. And this lack of an opinion seems to be associated, based on the questions and responses we got, it seems to be associated with a lack of knowledge about the topic as a whole. So if they don't know much about the topic, they don't have an opinion. Now let's dive a little bit into consumer behavior. So we wanted to ask a question, if a consumer is buying a product, they know it has a nanomaterial, are they more or less likely to buy it? And again, here, a little bit of context is useful to have. So there is, first of all, a general trend in the public in the EU to be more aware of environmental issues and health and safety issues. And as this awareness has increased as a whole, the public has become more and more cautious when they are buying products. As a general rule, they want to buy products that are safe. Now, when we asked most people who are buying a product for the first time, more than half of them say that they want to read the label, the information about this product. So that's a high portion of people. And we're talking about products in general. Also, a bit of useful context here is that the majority of respondents in the survey said they would be willing to pay more for a product that is guaranteed to be safer. So they were saying they're willing to pay somewhere between 1 to 20% more for a product that they feel is safer or that is guaranteed safer. Now, jumping into nanomaterials specifically, the consumers were saying when we asked them the question, if you're buying a product and you know it's nanomaterial, would you buy it or not? And the consumers in these 5 countries seem to be more cautious when they are buying a product and they know it has a nanomaterial. But importantly, this level of caution depends on the category of the product. So people are less concerned if they're buying something like a computer or a car product that has nanomaterials in it, but a lot more cautious when they're buying a product that might go into their body or on their body. So things like medicines, foods, cosmetics that might contain nanomaterials. And this in itself is not surprising. People tend to be more concerned in general about what they eat and the medicines they take as a whole. And an important finding in this is that the more the consumers know about nanomaterials, the less they are concerned. So as they are receiving more information, they feel a higher level of confidence, of safety, of trust in this product. And this is important because what this tells us is that there is a need in general to make consumers, to make the public aware of nanomaterials, of their safety, and there's an important role here for the EU to play. So going a bit into more detail with the information we collected, we can divide the respondents into 4 categories or 4 types of respondents. So the first group of these, around 19% of the respondents, is what we call enthusiasts. So these are individuals who have a generally positive attitude or a very positive attitude towards nanomaterials. And this group demographically is typically someone in the age of 40 to 49 years old, and they typically live in a bigger city and have a higher level of education, a university education in there. Now, the next group, and this is the biggest group of the respondents, is what we call tolerating. They have generally an open attitude and a tolerating attitude towards nanomaterials. But typically, this respondent is younger. They're a person younger than 29 years old, and they tend to be someone like a student, but also a person with university level education as well. The next group is very different from the first two. So the next group is what we call a fearing category. And this is a group that is explicitly rejecting or avoiding nanomaterials. And there's about 23% of the population. This group is demographically also different. They tend to be someone over 50 years of age and someone who has a level of education lower than a university education. It also interestingly seems to be that females are a bit more cautious than males. So there's more females in this group than males. And finally, the last group and the smallest group is a group that has no opinion. So this is around 12% of the respondents. And these are people who have no clear opinion or attitude about nanomaterials or their uses or their impacts. And demographically, this group is very similar to the fearing group, but the difference is that they tend to be a bit younger, so they are in the age group of 30 to 39 years old. Now, from this, we also asked the question from our respondents about who do you trust when you're looking for information about nanomaterials, and where do you go to look for information about nanomaterials? Because we wanted to know in order to be able to communicate better to the public. So first of all, about information sources. Actually, more than half the respondents said they feel equally informed about nanomaterials compared to other modern technologies. And now the main source of information for people are, not surprisingly, either the internet or television. But when people are actively going out and seeking information, they go towards the internet. However, most people, only about 1 in 5 respondents said they have specific websites or specific centralized sources that they go to for their information about nanomaterials. Now, if we think about the question, who do you trust to get information about nanomaterials? Well, first of all, we saw that the highest level of trust from the public is in scientists and research institutions, people in academia as a whole who are studying nanomaterials. And then closely following that is the national health authorities in the country in question. People trust that as a source of information. And very closely followed by that, there's a trust in EU authorities or agencies like the European Commission, like the European Chemicals Agency. Now, around 14% of the public say they have absolute trust in these authorities, and then around half of the respondents say they place some trust in these authorities. And overall, the level of trust in these seems to be also comparable to the level of trust that the public has in things like environmental organizations as well. However, we do see a clear difference in the level of trust in politicians and producers or distributors or products. So in the respondents in this survey indicated they have generally a lower level or low level of trust in politicians or the manufacturers of these products that contain nanomaterials. Moving on from there, we wanted to see what are the kind of factors that might impact how the public sees nanomaterials. Are there certain demographic factors, for example, that might have an impact? And what we see is that the age of the respondent, the level of education, and surprisingly, religious belief are the three most important factors that impact the public's perception about nanomaterials. So, people who are older, have an age of over 50 years old, tend to be more cautious in general about nanomaterials. People who have a higher level of education seem to be more trusting of nanomaterials. And then people who have more religious beliefs seem to have a higher level of concern for nanomaterials. Now, in contrast, there have been studies in the past that are also suggesting or showing that the level of concern that the public has is driven not so much by demographics, so things like age or education or gender, but more by the personality type of the individual. So people who are cautious as a whole tend to be cautious about new technologies. So this is a different or a contrasting type of information that we found. Now, a very important thing that we found in the study is that a big portion, so around 87% of the public, say that they want to have information about nanomaterials in the products that they buy. Whether this be by some kind of a label on the product or some kind of a sign. And the desire to be informed is higher for things like products like cosmetics, like food, like medicine. So here, the public has a strong desire to be informed. But very importantly, this study was not really designed at exploring what kind of information should be there on such a label, and to assess that would really require a bit of further work. But nevertheless, it gives a strong signal that the public wishes to know about nanomaterials in the products that they purchase. So, okay, now this gives us a general idea of the results of this particular study, and it's time to think about what kind of conclusions we can take from this going forward. So the one thing that clearly comes from this study is that having a higher level of awareness about nanomaterials is important for getting really the benefits and avoiding the risks of nanomaterials. We do see that consumers have a cautious attitude toward nanomaterials, but they're not overly concerned about nanomaterials. So they're cautious in the same way that they're cautious about other technologies like computers, like social networks, but not in the same way that they're concerned about things like asbestos or GMOs. So there's a level of concern, but not fear, let's say. An important piece of information there is that the people seem to have a good level of trust in the work that scientists do, as well as the work that national and EU institutions do. And this means that because there is a lot of work really done by these authorities on nanomaterials, there's also a need to communicate about the work that is done. And we see very clearly that the more available information is, the more accessible information is to the public about nanomaterials, it means that the public becomes more and more accepting of these technologies, more trusting. So this really gives a very strong signal that we need to continue to raise awareness to the general public about nanomaterials. We need to continue to collect information that is generated from a variety of sources, because indeed there is a lot of research that is being funded about the safety and markets of nanomaterials, and we need to put these together and make it accessible to the public. And this is exactly what the UN has been doing, and that what we hope to continue to do over the coming years in order to give to the public the information that they clearly say they want to have. And with this, I come to the very end of my presentation. I thank you for listening to this. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thanks a lot, Abdel, for that interesting presentation on how society is looking on nanos and perceive the trust of nanomaterials. This presentation that I'm going to give is going to take us more from the regulatory angle and how regulations are or are not improving trust. My name is Jenny Holmqvist, and I've been working with nanomaterials for over 10 years, both from industry point of view and now as part of ECHA, working on the implementation of REACH for nanomaterials together with many other colleagues. I will take these presentations from different angles, and the first one is that I want to take a step back. We have been working for nanos now for many years, and let's see what the developments have looked like. And then I want to take you a little bit through where we are now. We have now the revised REACH annexes, so how is it now looking like from our point of view? And I will also lay out a little bit what we see in the road ahead. So what are the challenges that we can see in front of us, and how are we in ECHA going to address those? And then I want to leave you with a little bit of key points and conclusions, and also come back to the title of the presentations, how regulations influence trust of nanomaterials. Like I said, nanomaterials have been something that has been discussed for a number of years. And on this slide, I have tried to develop or divide the timescale into 5 years. And this is for sure not an exhaustive list of achievements in the area of nanomaterials. It's just a couple of highlights. Nanomaterials started to really being discussed as a group of substances already before 2007, but maybe to put sort of a starting date on this discussion, and also for the sake of this slide and presentation, let's start there. So in around 2007, there we started to realize that nanomaterials may be different from the bulk materials. And bulk is put here in quotation mark, because normally we mean bulk materials as those that have coarser particle size, bigger particle size. And we also start to, around that time, start to think about how can we define them? What are these groups of substances? What will be the criteria for defining them and also characterize them? And this led to the Commission recommendation for a definition, which is currently going through a review. We also start to think about the guidances. So we had the REACH guidance. It was still early days, but maybe they needed to be amended. So how will the existing REACH guidance, how should that be amended for nanomaterials? Also at the policy level, the Commission started a subgroup to the Caracal to specifically discuss nanomaterials. And that was more from a strategic and policy angle. And from more of an implementation angle, we formed a group to assess already registered nanomaterials, so post the first registration deadline. How did industry go about to demonstrate the safe use of those high volume substances that also contained nanoforms? From 2012 onwards, the first set of guidance was published. And also here in ECHA, we started with the nanomaterial expert group to discuss with member states, industry, NGOs on implementation related issues. The first substance evaluation cases was also published, which illustrated or which showcased that there were some legal uncertainties on how certain requirements should be implemented. This sparked a discussion on whether REACH should be amended for nanomaterials, if the annexes needed to be clarified further, and that discussion, as we know, took many years, and not until 2020 those revisions entered into force. But also the tools, not just the guidance, but the test guidelines were put under scrutiny. Were they actually applicable for these materials? And if not, which ones should be amended and adapted? This work was further underpinned by the huge efforts at OECD level in relation to the sponsorship program, where a number of nanomaterials were tested just to see how the test guidelines were working for these groups of substances. In later years, we have continued in ECHA to update the guidances. We have also seen how the research projects that has started long before 2017, how the outcome of those research projects have helped us to inform us better on partly how the guidance should be formed or developed, but also the test guidelines. And as we know, as I already said, in 2020, the revised annexes came into force. And let me pause on that with the next slide, just to give you a better feeling on, or an understanding of what those changes were. So first of all, the general provisions were that all new and existing registrations that consisted of nanoform or had the nanoforms within the scope needed to be updated to be complying with the new information requirements. And those also applied to all nanoforms above 1 tonnage, or where the total volume of the substance exceeded 1 tonnage. And also the chemical safety report, which is where industry demonstrates the safe use of nanos, has to include an assessment also of the nanoforms for the exposure and for the risk. And the new amendments to the annexes also pointed towards that downstream users who may modify the nanoforms or the particles need to have an increased awareness of what that modification may mean in terms of risk, and also then potentially either communicate it upstream or perform a downstream user chemical safety report. In the more sort of specific technical part of the annexes relating to the information requirements, there were also a number of new obligations or requirements for companies relating to characterizations in Annex 6, where certain parameters were added for nanoforms, and also that the new amendments of Annex 6 gave registrants an opportunity to form sets of nanoforms where the conditions were met in terms of boundaries, and also in terms of that the set itself needed to have the same risk and exposure assessments. But there was in particularly new information requirements that related to tox and ecotox specifically for nanoforms. So what are we doing with these new annexes? Well, in terms of compliance checks, we have very much followed the normal way of dealing with substances, where we see specifically for nanomaterials, more like a two-step rocket, if you like. So the first one is really to clarify what I said here about the characterization, that the sets have clear boundaries, and that there is this robust justification for hazard exposure and risk assessment. And then as a second step, when this is completed and we have really a good understanding of the Annex 6 requirements, then to go on to assess also the information requirements. And this is in line with normal compliance check for other substances as well, where the substance ID is really the starting point, and so also for nanoforms. We have also risk management initiatives that have moved on throughout these years. So tattoo inks which is based on classification and labeling properties or hazard properties, where we know that many pigments also consist of nanoforms. We also have a recent restriction proposal relating to microplastics, where the issue around the methods, the lacking or the challenges that we see with actually measuring these nanoparticles or nanoplastic, as it is in this case, that was concerns that was brought up in the process of developing this restriction for microplastics. So again, this is a theme that comes throughout the work that we do, and also that we see from companies that they also bring up, some companies bring up as concern in complying. But we have tried, as I said on my first slide, continuously to provide support for companies. We actually this year published a new practical guide for how to prepare registration for nanoforms. We have also updates underway for both human health and also for environmental endpoints, and also for registration of nanoforms based on the experience that we have seen from companies since January 2020. We also continuously, as the need arises, creates webinars, and we also have over the years had several activities where we try to support also different industry sectors, because they sometimes are different and the needs of those are then better covered by bilateral discussions. And these webinars are also still accessible on our websites, and with those webinars that we have had, there is also an extensive Q&As that has been developed afterwards to really try to answer the challenges and questions that industry has. So where are we now? So by the 1st of September this year, we have updated registrations for 130 substances. And we know that this is lower than we anticipated. And in communication with member states and industry, we have indicated that we believe that there are around 300 substances on the EU market. And this is an estimate that we have made, but we have also not made it out of thin air. So we have assessed the other legislations that we have at the EU level, such as cosmetic directive. We have also tried to use the national inventories that certain member states have to gain a better understanding of what we can expect. And this leads us to some assumptions. So we still think that there are companies that may still not be aware of these new obligations that are in place under REACH. We have tried to awareness raising campaigns, letter campaigns to reach these companies, but the few number that we have currently, the 130 substances, points towards that maybe there is still work to be done there. There is also a lack of the nano-specific data that we hope should be regenerated through the test methods. And we see that registrants very often use alternative methods. And although alternative methods are extremely useful and valuable, they should never compromise on the quality of data. And in the context of nanos, if we assume, wrong or right, that the hazard of the nanoforms are always the same as the bulk, there could be a risk of missing out on important information and data by doing that kind of read across. And there we think that maybe some of the alternative methods, such as read across, could be questionable in this case. And then also, as I said, also throughout this presentation, we do see that there is a lack of sometimes certain test methods, and the registrant express concerns about not knowing if a certain test method is applicable. And this again could potentially lead to that certain data generation is simply not happening because of this assumption. So the road ahead for us, Well, this is an excellent opportunity for us to also remind those who attend this conference that companies must submit registration with the data as outlined in REACH to demonstrate safe use of nanoforms. This is now in REACH itself, and we hope that this is also part of awareness raising and that we can see this number going up over time. We also see that there is a need to continue to support companies, and this is also what we have in front of us through updating of guidances to support the work at OECD level in revising some of the test methods to make sure that the tools and guidance are available to help companies to comply with the information requirements in REACH. We also think that using the nanomaterial expert group could potentially give us a unique opportunity to align our regulatory approaches with member states and also allow for discussions with industry on these challenges that they are currently facing. And again, there is continued effort needed also to raise the awareness among companies that these regulations or requirements are currently there and also how to meet them in the best way. So I want to now just finalize my presentation by giving you a couple of key points and also come back to the title of the presentation. So if we go back to the tricky question of this presentation, can regulation improve trusting in nanomaterials? Well, trust is a vague term and is complex. It's influenced by many more factors than we have available in time to discuss today, like, for example, the benefit of using certain products, and also very much personal perception of willingness to take risks or whatever. So it's a very complex term. If we, for the sake of this, just look at it from an ECHA perspective and from a REACH perspective, it's true that REACH has its main objective to ensure that chemicals and nanoforms can be safely used on the EU market. In order to achieve this objective, industry has to comply with the information requirement, compile or demonstrate the safe use in their chemical safety report that has to be submitted to ECHA and which can later be checked as part of compliance. And actually, regulations act as a lock and key with compliance and enforcement. So perhaps it's more a question of perceived trust that because something is regulated, then it is also compliant with the regulations objectives. In this case, something that is under REACH is assumed safe because REACH is there to do exactly that. What REACH is also doing, which is important for trust, is that REACH contributes to transparency. REACH ensures that information that is submitted by registrants is also shared via our website, but also shared between in the supply chain, that companies comes together in their supply chain to ensure that the information that eventually is there to ensure the safety is also communicated in the supply chain as a whole. And thereby also the consumers have an easy access to this information. So regulations indeed do contribute to creating trust. If I now just finalize with some key points and conclusion, I just want to stress here as a first point that nano is not a done issue. Done in the sense that now we have the information requirements in REACH, so now everything is working. I think through this presentation I illustrated that there is still more work needed to be done. There is still more awareness raising there. The guidance is still not necessarily all complete and a continuous development. And also that certain test methods are still needing to be checked and reviewed and are actually going through that process right now. So there is still work to be done. And also that the perception that the REACH annexes will generate nano-specific data might also be hampered by the miles we still need to go. And the fact that we don't necessarily have all the nano-specific data at our fingertips as regulators, it could potentially actually hamper our regulatory decision making. And finally, as we saw, regulation and trust is also demanding other aspects, and we all need to play our role. Us as regulators, member states, also regulators, industry and NGOs, we all have a part to play in ensuring that trust in the regulations and those substances that falls within the scope of, for example, REACH, are fulfilling the objective of the legislation. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to any questions from all of you.
So thank you everyone for listening so far to the presentation. We've received already a number of questions in the Q&A, and we will be answering those here. Just for your information, the session is recorded, and the recording will be made available after the end of the conference, as well as the replies to the questions and that you have submitted. Maybe we'll try to take here a few of the questions that you've made and give some of the answers to them. But I encourage you to please continue to ask questions. So, and if you would like to take the floor, just please raise your hand so that we can give you the floor to put your question. So we have a first question in here to address that has come up, asking whether some nanomaterials are safer or more known than others, because the study in this question, the public perception study, is referring to them as nanomaterials as a whole. And in this, what we try to say and emphasize always in our communications is that nanomaterials, of course, are all like general chemicals, meaning that you need to assess these on a case-by-case basis. And so it should not be surprising then that certain nanomaterials may be more hazardous than others. But of course, for the context of this particular survey, we needed to simplify the questions to the public so that we can get some useful information from the survey. Then if we look at some of the other questions as well, we have a question here from Axel Hesslin saying, does the question 2 of the survey really mean risk, or was hazard meant? The risk should remain the same if the use conditions are adapted as necessary. Of course, Axel, this distinction between risk and hazard is an important one, but for the purpose of the survey, this was really asking about the public's perception, and so this distinction between risk and hazard might be too subtle for the purpose of the survey. So we were asking really about how the public perceives the nanomaterials. Of course, in the end, when we are talking about regulatory hazard or risk assessment, then of course the distinctions between hazard and risk are quite important. Now, if we look at some of my colleague.
Yeah, good afternoon all. My name is Tuomas Aitasalo. I work as a scientific officer in the chemistry unit here in ECHA. And there was a question about the particle size measurement techniques. And as the requirement is for a number-based particle size distribution of constituent particles, in practice, in most cases, the electron microscopy-based techniques are applicable and most suitable for the measurement of the particle size distribution. Of course, in some cases, it could be possible to use also other techniques, but because the particles needs to be counted to be able to establish the number-based particle size distribution, the electron microscopy techniques are the most suitable in most of the cases.
We're looking to see here if there are additional questions that we can try to reply to. We in here are seeing that there's a question regarding the implementation of nano labeling in food and cosmetics and biocides, and this particular study does not really address the issue of labeling. Of course, this was one thing that some of the respondents in the survey indicated that they would be interested to see, so some labeling, but then the implementation of such a label is a bit out of the scope of what the survey was meant to do or the activities of the EU1.
Thanks, Abdel, and also thanks to the question that keeps coming in. We have got a number that I would like to group a little bit looking into the future. There are from, among others, Julian Lau, which are asking us about dissolution, biodurability, and biopersistence in the next REACH update. And also further down on how to do with read across. Maybe start with the first one there. The current discussion on how to amend REACH is still a discussion, and of course ECHA is following that, but this kind of questions will be impossible for us to answer at this point in time. And also going on to the question from Blanca further down in the chat regarding read across and the need to continue with in vivo experiment if read across is not possible. Thanks a lot. This is an interesting discussion, a discussion that we have had already for a number of years. It almost goes down to case by case in order to answer it. So it depends a little bit what substance we are talking about, what nanoform, and then what we are reading across between. So indeed, I think with the presentation, we do want to point out that the general assumption that nanoforms always behave as the larger particles, so like, for example, the bulk, is not always true. And we would like to encourage industry with that presentation to think a bit more carefully how they justify read across. And indeed, read across needs to be underpinned just like as well and as thoroughly as for any other substance. There is no difference here. Maybe also to ask if there is any further questions from the floor. We do have them in the Q&A, and we can of course also answer them there, but also give the opportunity for anyone who wants to also ask them live. Here in the chat, we have a couple of colleagues here sitting still, so I think we will appreciate also have interactions with those of you who are still listening and following us.
And I see here in terms of time, we are right at 5:29, 5:30 now. So perhaps we should also invite you to move from this session towards the closing remarks, which will be starting momentarily, but we will still try to answer your questions and provide answer to these also after the end of the recording. So with that, I'd like to say thanks to all of you for joining in and listening and submitting your questions. We wish you a very nice and pleasant evening, and we invite you to go to the main session for the closing remarks of the conference.